Okay, so we're going to take a look at some of the examples you had last night. I got one question on the work in relation to, in some of the questions there were, I think, letters, and in some of the questions there were numbers given for the angle. Okay, so yeah, so let's talk about that now, I suppose. So if I go back to page 396, and I'm going to do question if I take a look at question, let's say 8. Okay, so question 8, so it's tan of c is equal to 1 over root 3. Now, we are obviously in trigonometry because of this thing here. So when we find ourselves in trigonometry and we're dealing with sine, cos and tan, it's always a good idea to write out silly old Hitler couldn't advance his troops over Africa. Okay. Silly old Hitler couldn't advance his troops over Africa, and from that we get S is equal to O over H, C is equal to A over H, and T is equal to O over A. Now, we have tan over here. So I know, just from looking at my videos, I realize you can't see my mouse cursor, so you don't know what I'm pointing at. So we have tan over here. So I know that tan of C is equal to 1 over root 3. That's given in the question, but that's also equal to opposite over adjacent. And I get this from this thing over here. It's the over Africa part. So if I was to draw a right angle triangle, and I never talk about the right angle, I'm going to talk about this angle down here. I could just as easily pick this angle up here, but I won't, okay? I'll pick the angle down there, be conventional. So I'm talking about this angle down here, angle C. Now, I know that the opposite is the number 1, and the adjacent is the square root of 3. So this side here is the adjacent. So therefore that must be the square root of 3, and the opposite to the angle C is the number 1. Now, we weren't asked to find tan, we were asked to find sine. So sine C is equal to, we go back over here and we now look at this rectangle up here. It's silly old Hitler. So it's S, so sine is equal to O over H, which is equal to 1 anyway is the opposite. We go through the triangle to 1. So 1 is the opposite, but we don't know the length of the hypotenuse. We don't know that length yet. So I can't answer this question down here until I work out that length. So in order to find the length of that side, I'm going to use Pythagoras' theorem. So I'm going to go that, let's call it x maybe instead of hypotenuse. Let's call it h for hypotenuse. So h squared equals 1 squared plus the square root of 3 squared, and that's c squared equals a squared plus b squared. Now, h squared is equal to 1 plus 3 h squared is equal to 4, h is equal to the square root of 4, h is equal to 2. So I now know that sine c must be 1 over 2. Because h is equal to 2 and sine is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. I'll just draw my triangle again now that I have all the sides filled in. So it's 1, root 3 and 2, and the angle C is down here and our right angle is there. And we're now asked to find cos of C, and cos of C is equal to couldn't advance his CA over H, which is equal to adjacent, which is root 3 down here, all over the hypotenuse, which is 2. That okay? So that was question 8 for the homework. Hopefully that made sense to you guys. So in that case there, because we weren't given an angle, we were asked to give the ratio. Sorry, there's a hair on my screen. There, we got it. Okay, so we weren't given a size of the angle. So as far as we can take that question, we can take that question at the moment to be cos C is equal to root 3 over 2. And the value of cos C is root 3 over 2. Now that's as far as we can go with that question at the moment. In the next few weeks, we will be looking at how to progress on. But for the moment, that's as far as we can go with that type of question. So this C here is a placeholder for some number, and that number will be the size of the angle. Now, if we flick forward to the other questions you had, so this was page, this is the second set of questions, this is page 399, question 1, and I'm going to do the first part of that. And that's a right angle there. That's 40 degrees. That's 10, and that's x. Write down which trigonometric ratio is needed to calculate the length of the side marked x in each of these triangles. Okay, so now for this type of question, what it's really useful is to think about what we have and what we need. Okay. So we have 10, and in the language of opposite, adjacent and hypotenuse, 10 is called the hypotenuse. 40 degrees, well, that's our theta, because that's our angle. And we need x, and x, because it's beside the angle, he's going to be called the adjacent. So we go back to our sine theta, cos theta, tan theta, equals, fraction, opposite over hypotenuse, adjacent over hypotenuse, and opposite over adjacent. So we now have to make a decision, which one of these three guys here am I going to select? And because I need one that deals with h, theta, and a, I'm obviously going to select cosine. So for part 1, question 1, the answer will be cosine. That's all you had to do for that question. Okay, let's take a look at page 399, question 2. Page 399, question 2, and again we look at part 1. I might do part 3 in this as well for you guys. Okay, so we draw our triangle just so we can talk about it, and it's x, 7 and 33 degrees, and this time we're asked to work out the length of the side marked x. Okay, so, well, that's a trigonometry question. We write out our sine, cos, tan, theta, 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 equals, some fraction. Silly old Hitler couldn't advance his troops over Africa. And we then have a right angle there. And we then have and need. Okay, what do we call x first of all? Let's decide that we need, and if we're talking about this angle down here, which is 33 degrees, x is the opposite to that. 7 is called the hypotenuse, and because we have our 33 degrees, we have our theta. So which one of these guys over here deals with all three of h, theta, and o? H, theta, o, it must be sine. So we write out sine, and we start filling in the blanks. Sine theta, well, our theta is 33 degrees. Then there's an equals, then there's a fraction, and we have opposite on top, and our opposite is x, and our hypotenuse is 7. We don't like doing trigonometry, so as soon as we can, if we have a number in the sine, cos, or tan, we go to our calculator and we hit sine 33, and that gives us 0.5446 equals x over 7. And this is no longer a trigonometry question, but we're now in the really comfortable zone of algebra. You spot we have one fraction over here, and we technically have one fraction over here. So what am I allowed to do? I'm allowed to cross multiply. So I can say 7 times 0.5446 equals 1x. So x by itself must equal 7 multiplied by 0.5446 equals 3.8122. If that, yeah, so that's how we tackle that question there, okay? So that's up here. Up here, we were forced into leaving it as c because there was no number given to us, so we just had to leave it with cos c is equal to that, and we couldn't really work out anything. We don't have the skills yet to work out the size of c. But for this question here, we were given the number, and we had to put that number into our sine function, and then evaluate it down to this thing here. So that's calculator there. I'm just looking at this page here that I'm making. I could upload this page as well onto Teams. I might start doing that for you guys. That would be a good thing to do, I think. Okay, so I'm going to now do question 2, part 3. And again, I'll just draw the triangle. I would not advise you draw the triangle in your exam. Okay, so we have 58 degrees here. We have 12 here, and we have Z here. Right, so we're asked to find Z, so we write down have, need, and somewhere on a scrap of paper you will write out sine, cos, tan, theta, 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 equals, some fraction. Silly old Hitler couldn't advance his troops over Africa. So we have, well, if that's the right angle down here, 12 must be the hypotenuse, and 58 is obviously the size of the angle, so that's the symbol for angle, which is theta, and we need the opposite because we're talking about this angle 58 degrees, so we go through the triangle to get to Z, so he must be opposite. So we're looking for one of these guys over here that deals with H, theta, and O. Let's try cos. H, theta, but no O. Let's try tan. No H, no good to us. H, theta, and O. There we go. So it's sine. So I then write down sine, and I start filling in the blanks. Sine of theta, so I turn my theta into 58, equals opposite, which is Z, all over the hypotenuse, which is 12. I don't like doing trigonometry. I want to get back into algebra as quick as possible. So into my calculator, I type in sine 58, which is 0.8480, which is equal to z over 12. So z by itself is equal to 12 multiplied by answer, which is 10.17. 10.18 actually, sorry. 10.18. So that is the size of Z. So lads, this is really, really, really important stuff. So I'm not going to go any further. With theory today, because I really want you guys to get good at being able to spot which trigonometric ratio to use. And once you've spotted which one to use, then be able to use it to turn it into kind of an algebra sum as quick as possible. Right, so your homework for tonight is going to be question 3, page 400, and question 3. Or if you are one of my 5th years who is dealing with the new book, don't worry, I'll put this in the assignment anyway for you. I think you're towards the back. You are on page 535, question 3 of the new book. Okay, so basically there's only 3 questions there. Yeah, there's only 3 questions. But what I want you to do is make sure that you've done all the previous day's questions as well. So question 1, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you should have question 1 and question 2 done from last night, but if you struggled with them, have another go at them today, okay? So please become experts in this. It's so important. Yeah, it's again, it's another practically guaranteed question. Trigonometry. They probably will not give you a leaving cert without asking you a trigonometry question. Okay, so I'll see you again tomorrow. I'm not going to do any new theory today. Just get good at this stuff, okay, guys? Thank you.